There are many people in the world whose secrets and mysteries still amaze the imagination. In this video, I would like to tell about such people. Inside this man were 24 different personalities. His name was Billy Milligan. He was accused of raping 3 women, and he went down in history as the first man acquitted by a court because of his split personality. Because of his split personality, little Billy's childhood was difficult. He was born in 1955. For years later, his father committed suicide, and his stepfather was later accused of pedophilia and of molesting Billy himself. It was during his childhood that other identities began to emerge. At 20, Milligan received his first conviction for robbery. And in 1977, he raped 3 women on the campus of Ohio State University. He was facing a huge sentence, and Milligan's lawyer decided to base his defense on the defendant's mental insanity. Billy was referred to a psychiatrist, who diagnosed him as schizophrenic and sent him to a psychiatric hospital. And here's where the fun begins. Billy began to exhibit his multiple split personalities. So it soon became known that there were 10 personalities that were primary and dominated the rest. After a battered 16-year-old wanted to commit suicide, the personalities took over and effectively put Billy to sleep, taking charge of his life. The right personalities came in when it was most needed, and each one was a true self-sufficient individual with his own special abilities put psychologists on edge. For example, the educated Englishman Arthur, who knew many sciences and was responsible for Billy's body in daily life. Here was the personal Rambo Billy Yugoslav communist Rhaegar Rodaskovic, an expert in weapons, who was in charge of the general body in dangerous situations. Adalana, a 19-year-old lesbian who wanted intimacy and turned out to be guilty of rape, and many others. The unifying personality was a certain teacher who first showed up to help the famous writer Daniel Keyes tell the story of Billy Milligan in his book. Some of Billy Milligan's personalities were gifted artists and musicians, specializing in different kinds of painting and playing different instruments. Billy spent 10 years in a mental institution before being released. Doctors acknowledged that he had become whole, and Milligan's psyche could be considered stable. Billy died in 2014 when he was 59 years old. Even as a child, the little Polish boy Wolf Messing showed wonders of memory and could easily memorize whole pages of the most complex books. He was born in 1899 into a poor family. Wolf's mother died early from consumption, and his father constantly beat him. Eventually, at the age of 11, Wolf steals a few pennies, leaves home, and boards the first train he sees. When the controller approached the little boy and demanded a ticket, the frightened Wolf handed him a dirty scrap of newspaper that was handy. The ticket inspector returned the piece of paper to the boy and wished him a pleasant journey. It was then that Wolf Messing realized for the first time that he possessed some unknown power. The train took Wolf to Berlin, where he took any such job, but was still desperately hungry. Eventually, from exhaustion, he collapsed in the street without feeling. In the hospital, when he opened his eyes, the boy said, "You don't have to put me in an orphanage." Dr. Abel, sitting at his bedside at that moment, was astonished. He was just thinking about it. Abel began to work with the boy, and Messing began to discover his unique abilities. He would lie down in a glass coffin and fall into a breathless sleep. He achieved an almost perfect understanding of the mental messages transmitted to him. While working in the circus, Messing found all the objects hidden by the audience that he could not see beforehand. By the time the Nazis came to power, he was known throughout Europe. But in 1939, Wolf Messing, a Jew, had to flee to the Soviet Union. In the new country, Wolf Messing continued his performance of psychological experiments. On them, Messing unmistakably determined by the power of his mind what any person was thinking, and what was in his pockets, for example. The wonders of hypnosis need not even be mentioned. But the most amazing is perhaps the prophecies of Wolf Messing. When the medium predicted the crash of the plane in which Stalin's son was to fly, the head of the USSR insisted that his son went by train. The plane did crash, and all the people on that plane were killed. Messing accurately predicted the date of the end of World War II, for which he later received personal thanks from Joseph Stalin. After predicting that Hitler would die if he sent troops to the east, the Führer promised 200,000 Reichsmarks for Wolf Messing's head. This enigmatic man died in 1974 at the age of 75. Ettore Mariana was an Italian physicist who was predicted that his discovery would soon turn the world upside down. He was born in Sicily in 1906. At 22, he decided to study physics and enrolled at the University of Rome, where he became a doctoral student a year later. In 1937, he discovered neutrinos and thus was 40 years ahead of his time. But he did not publish many of his studies, claiming he was dissatisfied with the results and destroyed documents with unique research. It is unlikely that we will ever know what Majorana reached in his scientific research, for in 1938 he took all his money out of the bank, and then his family found a note asking him to forgive him and always remember him. But a short time later his colleagues received a telegram asking them to forget everything he had written earlier and that he was going home. But Majorana never returned. Investigators began a search. It turned out that Mariana had indeed bought a steamboat ticket. A witness was found who allegedly sailed all three in the same cabin. But when investigators asked the company employees to show Majorana's ticket, they said all the information had been lost. Majoran's traveling companion later said he wasn't sure he had sailed with him. The relatives placed photos and information about Ettore Majorana in all the newspapers, hoping someone would identify him. Witnesses were found, and there were dozens of them. But it was not possible to get a trace of my wound during the years of searching. Some believe that Mariana discovered nuclear physics before other scientists and realized that atomic energy could cause irreparable harm to humanity. Mussolini was in power in Italy at the time, and Mariana could not have been unaware of what would happen if his discovery fell into the hands of the fascists. This version is supported by the fact that after Ettore disappeared, it was Mussolini who personally supervised his search. More recently, based on a randomly preserved photograph, it was possible to find out that Mariana lived in Venezuela from 55 to 59 years. But what was the genius physicist doing in South America? Why didn't he return to Italy after the fall of the Mussolini regime? And, most importantly, where did he disappear to after 38 years? It remains a mystery. In November 1970, a man walking with his daughters in the woods on the outskirts of the Norwegian city of Bergen discovered the burned corpse of a woman. The woman went down in history as Woman from Far Away, the name of the area in which she was found. It became her last name because no one ever learned her real name. Her torso lay in an extinguished fire, her head and upper body badly burned. She looked about 30 to 40 years old, but she was very beautiful, with a perfect physique. Also, no one had stolen the gold jewelry that the woman was wearing in the fire. They found the remains of a passport, and next to the body an empty bottle of Norwegian vodka and scattered sleeping pills. They found a bruise on the woman's neck, as might have been left by a martial arts professional. There were burns and scars on her fingertips that made it impossible to lift fingerprints. Police found the woman's suitcases at a local hotel. All of the prints on the items had been wiped off. Among her belongings were 9 different fake passports in different names, and the photos in the passports had been tampered with. It turned out that the woman frequently changed hotels in various European cities, staying under different names. Hotel employees recalled that the woman was visibly nervous, as if she was afraid of something. Eventually, the police thought the woman had committed suicide, but it wasn't that simple. Several years later, another witness turned up. He stated that while on his hike, he saw the woman in the company of 2 men of Mediterranean appearance. The men were very sullen, and the woman was frightened as she passed the hiker. She clearly wanted to say something, but didn't dare. When the woman's corpse was discovered, this witness came to the police and told them everything he had seen. The investigator advised him to keep quiet about it, because the case would never be solved. That's why the tourist kept quiet for many years, but the case really remained unsolved. Many consider him the greatest inventor in history. He completely turned the idea of electric power upside down. His name was Nikola Tesla, but how many secrets and mysteries Tesla took with him to his grave? Almost everything Tesla did was beyond the comprehension of his contemporaries. In 1898, he fastened a kind of electromechanical device to an iron beam in the attic of the building where his laboratory was located. After a while, the walls of houses a few miles away from the laboratory began to vibrate, and people panicked and rushed outside to Tesla's house, and the police immediately rushed in. Tesla managed to turn off and destroy his device. He later stated that he could have cracked the earth. All it takes is the right vibrator and precise timing. He understands how dangerous such a device is. Tesla dreamed of a system of wireless transmission of energy to anywhere on the planet at his behest. A grandiose tower 57 meters high with a steel shaft is built. A test run took place in 1905 and had an amazing effect. Tesla lit up the sky over the ocean for thousands of miles. Newspapers wrote that a huge ball of light was blazing around the tower, and people walking down the street scrambled with creatures as they watched sparks fly between their feet and the ground. But the main goal of the experiments was accomplished. There were 200 electric lights from 25 miles away from the tower all at once. The electric charge was transmitted without wires through the ground in 1931. Nikola Tesla removed the engine in the car and installed an electric motor. Then Tesla fastened a small box under the hood. He then sat in the driver's seat, pressed the pedal, and the car drove. Tesla drove it for a week, reaching speeds of up to 150 kilometers per hour. There were no batteries or accumulators on the car, and the energy for the car was taken from an unknown source. After Tesla stated this, he was considered insane, and an angry Tesla destroyed the miracle box and buried the mystery of the electric car with it. Completely inexplicable remains the source of Tesla's knowledge of unknown and unexplored phenomena. Natural genius does not explain anything, because the range of Tesla's discoveries is quite wide. How he calculated and selected parameters of his installations, which still have no analogs and produce such amazing effects, without finding any other explanation, remains a mystery. Some researchers claim that Tesla received his technical and scientific revelations while in an altered state of consciousness, which allows to draw information from the single information field of the Earth. If you liked the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and write what you think about it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support is very important to me.